What part of Baylor football's performance in Salt Lake City did Dave Aranda say was unacceptable? That's coming up on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by 5 Hour Energy and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. We are still dissecting that 23-12 loss against Utah and what needs to get done. What do the Bears need to work on? Well, let's start with the part that was unacceptable. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. What Dave Aranda said was unacceptable. Not just me, but also recounting one of the great stories on this team, a guy whose name has not been said enough over the last few years, who had his breakout moment on Saturday and deserves his flowers. And then the loss of a Baylor legend today, one that if you're not familiar with his name, you almost certainly are familiar with his work. We're going to talk about the great career and Baylor roots of Carroll Dawson. That's coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But looking at the aftermath as we still pick up the pieces from Baylor football's loss to number 11 Utah on Saturday, and what was a weird game, right? In terms of, it looked like it was going to be 49-0, and then it looked like they might come back and tie it. And then it felt like they kind of blew a chance, even though they were never winning and they were getting blown out. And it was a weird feeling as a Baylor football fan, into how frustrated we should be about that performance. Do you just take it as, hey, this is the toughest game on Baylor's schedule? Or did you see things in there that were not good enough? I'm somewhere in the middle, but I definitely can't sit here and just say, oh yeah, it was just the toughest game on the schedule. Move on, flush it. Because to me, that sounds like an FCS team playing a top 25 FBS team. And that's not what Baylor should be at, right? I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team or they should beat every ranked opponent. No, but I think we needed to see more in order to be impressed by this team on Saturday. And Dave Aranda, in his weekly press conference, did say there was one part of this game that just did not cut it. And I think in a way he spoke for all of us when he said this.
It's a lot we have to improve. I mean, I think that first quarter is not acceptable. I think the start of it, the big plays that we gave up, getting the kick blocked and the strip sack and just all of those things were just completely avoidable. I take responsibility for all of those. And that's just, we cannot win playing that brand of football. Now, the ability to kind of regroup and to fight through and to make adjustments, I'm proud of. And I think we've shown the ability to do that through these last two games. And, that will extremely be tested in this game. There'll be a million adjustments in this one.
A million adjustments. That's a start. That is a start. I'll give him that. And I found this answer quite interesting to me because there was a point in the game on Saturday where I thought, boy, is that my old friend 2023 Baylor football? The way they came out here and fell behind 23-0. Dave said it was the first quarter. I'd give him the whole first half. That seems like a team that wasn't ready to play coming out of the gates. And how many times did we say that last year for the Bears? One thing we did not get in 2023, was that fight they showed in the second half. I'll say that. And B, the second thing we didn't get from 2023 that we did get in this game, or I should say this week, is that Dave Aranda answer. I mean, we were yearning for that answer last year of just saying something wasn't good enough. Instead of just, yeah, that wasn't good enough, but had a good week of practice. I don't know where that came from. That just wore on us and it grated on us every single week to hear that. Notice he did not say that there. Whether they had a good week of practice or not, We don't care. We don't care. Coaches make their break or their jobs on Saturdays. We all know the game isn't necessarily won on Saturdays. It happens throughout the week. But the way coaches and players and schools get perceived is by what happens on Saturday. And that first half was not good enough. The difference between middling teams and bad teams are the mistakes that you saw Baylor make in the first half of that game. Like, I think about it, 2022 versus 2023. It was a middling team in 22. It was a downright bad team in 23. Because 23, you saw a lot of the habits that we saw in the first half. And that's not taking care of the little things on special teams. Blocked field goal turns directly into a touchdown. Or not taking care of the football. Fumble inside your own 10-yard line. That directly leads to a touchdown. Your safety, Devin Bobby, getting absolutely frozen on a reverse play where he's trotting towards the other side of the field as the ball carrier's going right past his butt for a touchdown. Those little things, that's what separates a mid team from being a truly bad team. And in the first half of that game, we saw the habits of a bad team. In the second half, we saw the habits of a middling team. Right? One that was running the ball effectively in the third quarter, but couldn't do much else. Didn't have a lot in the playbook to switch things up. But they were taking care of the ball. They were winning the field possession battle. That just goes to show you that stuff is half the battle. Because, they pitched the second half shutout, right? Like that half is something you'd take. But what happened is a catastrophic first half where you fell behind 23-0. So I've seen a lot of excuses, or at least, silver linings from Baylor fans in the comments and on social media saying, well, if they, blocked kick, you take that off the board, there's a touchdown off. And if you take away the fumble, they only scored 7 points. But that doesn't matter. They scored those points. Those things happened. And so if you want to say the difference between winning and losing or having a shot to win versus having no shot are the little things in this game, I'm going to agree with you 100%. But Baylor, that is the first step towards not being a bad team again. It's this kind of old coaching cliche of before you learn how to win a game, you have to learn how not to lose it. And that typically comes with teams that blow leads in fourth quarters and stuff. But I think that rings true with this Baylor team because the guys here the last season and a half, or, 2 years, 22, 23, and now, they're not used to winning a lot of football games. They've lost more games than they've won comfortably. Right? So you do need to learn how to not make these catastrophic errors that lead to you falling in holes that you can't get out of. And that's what Baylor needs to work on first before it can worry about, big playability and flashiness and points and that kind of thing. You need to learn how to stop making these mistakes early or late in the games because that was the difference in the football game were the catastrophic mistakes that they made in the first and second quarters of this game against Utah. So, yeah, if you take those out, it's a game, but you can't take those out. You put those in. So, I'm at least happy you didn't say we had a good week of practice. But he's right, man. That's not acceptable. That's, I think, the terminology that I keep coming back to, whether it's the quarterback, the offensive line, the playbook, whatever excuses you want to make, that's fine. But no matter which way you slice it, this offensive performance was not good enough. It was not acceptable. And it can't be acceptable if we are going to be a decent football program, let alone a good one. It starts with this not being acceptable. But if it's truly not acceptable, then we won't see a performance like that again this season because that should be your worst offensive performance of the season. But all that truly remains to be seen. Guys, I want to tell you about a game I have been way into. And no, I'm not talking about that Baylor Utah game. Okay. It's this brand new mobile game that I think you guys are going to love. It's called Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Because in this game, you get to step into the shoes of Dave Aranda and you get to decide what is and what is not acceptable. And you can lead your college football program to glory. Okay. From recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, overseeing training camps, handling the scholarships, all of that. You're the GM and the head coach. You control every crucial detail of the program. And here's what I really love. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays. You don't have your back turned on 3rd and 7. You're calling those plays, okay? And your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but it's going to shape your program, as we've seen over the last few years. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free. It has no ads, and it's 100% playable offline. Play it on the go, as you want, when you want to. Of course, we get a special offer for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store. Receive a free boost to your program, so make sure to take advantage of that. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Yeah, that wasn't acceptable. Wasn't good enough on Saturday. In fact, if you want to take the bright spots, there's some, but there's not many. All right, that Baylor defense, I loved it. I loved that Baylor defense. I loved the way they fought, but that doesn't always lead to wins. And I think there's one player on offense that we could say gold star for him, man. What a moment. What a journey. Happy for this guy. And that's Josh Cameron. I always say that Cameron and Baylor combination, it's fantastic. No, Josh Cameron, man, he deserves the flowers. And to be honest, he's one of those players that you see give it all out there and you think this guy deserves more wins. There's a couple of them on Baylor's team for sure. And I know they're putting the work in. But Josh Cameron, man, what a story. Comes in here, walk on, waits for his moment, which has become such a part of Baylor football lore in the last 15 years or so. You talk about guys that waited their turn. And it's not something you see in sports or college sports anymore. Of course, the big one, Nick Florence. He's RG3's backup. He comes in 1 year of eligibility as the starter, and he sets all kinds of records. Bryce Petty. You want to talk about a guy waiting his turn. Have you ever even heard of a gray shirt? He used one, and he sat behind RG3 and Nick Florence, and he got his time and won 2 Big 12 championships and finished, 6th in the Heisman Trophy race 1 year? That's a dude who waited his turn. Seth Russell then. So it's a lot of quarterbacks, but Jalen Petrie waited his turn. Terrell Bernard waited his turn. He was playing behind the best linebacker in the Big 12 in 2019 and Clay Johnston. Unfortunately, Clay Johnston gets the ACL injury. Terrell Bernard slots in there. Baylor goes from having the best linebacker in the Big 12 to having the best linebacker in the Big 12. It's happened for years and years. These guys that wait their turn and get their moments or get their careers, right? It wasn't one moment for Bryce Petty. Wasn't one moment for Jalen Petrie. These guys had careers, years, seasons that were the payoff of waiting their turn. And I hope it's more than just a moment for Josh Cameron, because what a play that was. When nothing is going for this team offensively, he gets the ball and just makes everyone miss, take on the whole team, take on the whole defense. Probably broke 5 tackles on that play. Fantastic speed and power combo on it. And for those of us who have watched every snap of Baylor football the last few years, which is a good deal of you that listen to this podcast every day, we've seen the flashes from Josh Cameron as a punt returner and as a slot receiver. And I just remember thinking about this kid, especially last year, he's a good slot guy, right? He was effective in that position, but he's big and fast, man. He's not one of these little speedy guys. He's a big guy. He can bounce off some tackles. I would love to see if you can throw him on the outside or possibly even tight end. Tight end, they got that situation, they got that sorted out. And it is worth noting that tight ends are not offensive linemen. If you've been following on Twitter the last few days, someone will have reminded you of that. But he is filled in wherever they need him to be. And there's not enough of that in college football anymore. In fact, Dave Aranda said as much when talking about his walk-on turned star in the making, Josh Cameron.
Whether it's how much am I getting paid, how much is he getting paid, how much money is everyone's making in just that type of world, which that's the world we're in. For there to be a dude that's not like that and just continues to achieve, does everything you ask him to do. So just way proud of him. And what a great family. And I have to imagine just that catch and that run, been pretty cool to hang out with the Camerons during that one. Yeah.
It sounds a little old man yelling at cloud, what I'm about to say, but I'm so glad that Dave Aranda put it that way, because we're entering into a college football era where the walk-on is going to be no longer, essentially, with the scholarship increase. And it's so great for some of these other sports, but you can see a downside to it in football. One of the great parts about college football, college sports, but especially football, is the walk-on, right? The walk-ons that make their plays or end up making careers out of it. I think of, Hunter Renfrow at Clemson. He gets an NFL career. He gets the game-winning pass in the national championship game. One of the big moments in Baylor football history, the McPlay. Jared McVay started as a walk-on. Or someone we don't like thinking about, Josh Dawson from TCU, when he won the Biletnikoff, or not the Biletnikoff. Corey Coleman won the Biletnikoff. He won, I don't know, some big award. And he said, don't remember me as the guy who won this award. Remember me as the walk-on. There's a special chip on these guys' shoulders. And it's something that it's so rare in sports these days. And again, this team has gone through a lot of crap the last few years. And they haven't produced on the field. So I'm not saying it was undeserved, but some of it probably was. But they've been through a lot. And these kids show up every day, and a lot of them are on scholarship, and still some of them are getting paid now. And Josh Cameron was showing up to work every day because he wanted to play football and wanted to play at Baylor University. And he deserved that moment big time. And I hope it does become a season for Josh Cameron for what he was waiting his turn for, not just to play. And I'm so happy. I said this on the post-game show when we were live because his mom, Dr. Cameron, got involved in the chat to talk about how great that was. I'm so happy they got to be out there. That family's obviously been through a lot the last few years, and they got to be out there and see that moment happen. Didn't have to watch it on TV. They can see it in person and get it on the broadcast replay. That's such an awesome, awesome moment for them. It makes me think of, real quick, I did a feature on Monterey Baldwin a few years ago, got to talk to his parents. And they sent me the video that they took or someone took behind them at the Sugar Bowl when Monterey scored that touchdown. And it's incredible. I got to imagine the Cameron family had something pretty similar to that. So it's just one of those stories that probably doesn't get told enough. There's so many guys that slip through the cracks that don't get their Rudy moment. For as many Rudys as there are 100, 200, 1,000 walk-ons that don't get a moment like that. So it's very special that we got to see that Josh Cameron did get that moment, and that doesn't pass him by. First career touchdown. Shout out to Josh Cameron, a bright spot on that offense for his story. And there is another story of a Baylor legend that unfortunately we closed the chapter on yesterday. But let's talk about one of the Baylor legends you might not have heard of, but you are familiar with his work. That is coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode, 5-hour energy. Okay, guys, you got to tackle a to-do list this fall. I know you do. But 5-hour energy fixes your tired, and they fix it fast so that you can tackle that list. Okay, you just take one in the morning. You can check everything off your list in the afternoon and evening. If you're like me, you've always got a lot of stuff going on. Okay. And so when you get your supplies for your project or get your studying that you need to get done, do not forget the most essential tool, and that is a 5-hour energy shot. Okay. With zero sugar, convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick me up for getting stuff done. 5-Hour Energy website has so many flavors: watermelon, grape, tropical burst. They got a flavor for everyone. Try them all. Why not? On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's going to be delivered right to your door. So go to 5hourenergy.com. That is the number 5hourenergy.com and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You could use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, receive 20% off your order. Now, this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and can't be used with other promotions, and it's not good on subscription orders. But use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, receive 20% off that order. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Sad day for the Baylor community, and that is because we learned of yesterday the passing of Carol Dawson, former men's basketball coach at Baylor and total basketball lifer. You probably know him as, excuse me, the executive behind the two Houston Rockets championship teams in 1994 and 95. Still the only two in the franchise's history. He was a big part of that. He was a basketball star at Baylor. All Southwest Conference, averaged over 16 a game as a 6'5" center. How about that, man? We're worried about Norchad O'Meara playing the 5 at 6'9". And meanwhile, Carol Dawson was collecting all conference honors as a 6'5" center. Woo! The times they have changed, Bob Dylan. They changed a long time ago when it comes to that. But a truly remarkable basketball life. Play at small town Texas, Paris Junior College, really had impressed quite a lot of scouts to the point where he was going to go to Kansas. He was going to play for the Kansas Jayhawks. Was psyched to play with a guy who was a center that was a little bit taller than him by the name of Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt went on to the Globetrotters, went professional, and there went that. Carol Dawson comes to Baylor. And again, I don't think he was worried about playing center at KU. He plays center at Baylor, ends up becoming an assistant coach with the program, and eventually the head coach for 4 seasons. And I think his mark is really left as well at Baylor basketball in his time as an assistant. He recruited Tommy Bowman, who was the first Black basketball player in Baylor history. And a good book written by Chad Conine, a local guy here, that had a lot of Carol Dawson in it. In that Tommy Bowman story. But people forget, the late 60s, there were some good Baylor basketball teams, man. You skip ahead, right? From 1950 to Scott Drew era, basically 2010 is when you skip to Final Four to Elite Eight, and you don't see many of the banners. That's because there was only one team from each conference that went. And so Baylor had a couple of second, third place finishes and some real good teams that would have got more than a fair shot at the NCAA tournament these days. Carol Dawson built those teams. He built that program. And then after being the head coach, he actually scouted for the Cowboys, which I found very interesting. Here was this pure basketball guy, starts scouting for the Cowboys in the 70s when they're winning Super Bowls, like he's working for Tex Schramm, and then eventually for the Rockets as an assistant, I believe under Rudy Key. Is that right? But in his assistant days, they went to the finals twice, and then he became an executive there and led them to 2 championships, got them to the finals and won both of them in 94 and 95. So just a truly tremendous basketball life, and one of these kind of Baylor basketball pioneers that unfortunately we don't remember as much because it was a dry spell for Baylor basketball for a long time. And a lot of us think that, this program started with Scott Drew taking it over and creating that great rebound and rebuild. But there are a lot of other guys along the way that helped shape it into what it was. And Carol Dawson was a big part of that. Very proud Baylor guy, loyal servant to Baylor. And you can't find someone who's got any bad words about Carol Dawson. So sad to see that today. Lived a long, great life, 86, man. That's a pretty good life there. But Just wanted to kind of pay tribute to one of the great Baylor basketball figures in the program's history, and certainly wishing the best for his family in a tough time. But we are going to have some Baylor basketball talk, I believe, on the show tomorrow. There's some storylines I want to go over this week. There are some way too early rankings I want to go over. There are some projections I want to go over. So we're going to be mixing in some Baylor basketball stuff. Of course, we're going to start focusing on Air Force and that game Saturday as well. But looking back at this Utah game one more time, get involved in the comment section, y'all. Tell me what you thought was just not good enough for Baylor in this game. Whether you think they need to, what adjustments do you think they need to make? He said 1 million adjustments. Okay, I said that's a start. What adjustments do you think Baylor football needs to make? Get that down in the comments below, and what you think about Josh Cameron and his journey. I just think I love highlighting stories like that in any sport that Baylor plays and that I can do on this podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back at you tomorrow. Don't you worry, on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.